There's new data coming out this week. It shows a potential financial crisis in the making among American farmers.
Did you ever think when you voted for President Trump that things were going to cost you more?
I never thought I was going to lose this much money, this fast.
I want a trip. You want a jet, but now I don't know. What would have been better?
In the heartland of America, a quiet crisis is unfolding. Across the vast plains of Iowa, Illinois, and Nebraska, an unnatural silence has fallen over the cornfields. Towering silos, once symbols of American abundance and agricultural might, now stand as monuments to a monumental failure, filled to the brim with billions of bushels of grain that have nowhere to go. The very crop that built the backbone of the American economy is now on the verge of breaking it. This isn't a story about a bad harvest or a simple market downturn. This is a story of how a series of calculated political decisions, born from a renewed America First ideology, set off a devastating chain reaction, leaving American farmers stranded while their biggest rival to the north, Canada, strategically reaps the rewards. Before we break down this new unfolding situation, please like and subscribe to support our effort to keep the public informed. The crisis began in early 2025. The newly inaugurated Trump administration moved swiftly to deliver on its campaign promises of economic protectionism. The stated goal was to reshore industries and punish China for what were labeled as unfair trade practices. The primary weapon chosen for this battle was the Maritime Commerce Security Act. Framed to the public as a vital national security measure, it imposed a staggering tariff on all Chinese-built cargo vessels and, crucially, shipping containers entering U.S. ports. The administration argued this would cripple China's shipbuilding industry and incentivize a return to American manufacturing. But the architects of this policy fundamentally misunderstood, or willfully ignored, the intricate globalized nature of modern logistics. The blowback was immediate and catastrophic. The world's largest shipping lines rely overwhelmingly on a global pool of containers, the vast majority of which are manufactured in China due to cost and scale. It was impossible to service U.S. ports without using them. Instead of absorbing the crippling new tariffs, these international carriers did the logical thing. They passed the cost directly onto their customers. Overnight, the base cost for an American farmer to export a bushel of corn from the Gulf of Mexico skyrocketed by nearly 30%. A logistics analyst for a major grain exporter put it bluntly. It was chaos. We were getting rate updates every hour. A shipment of American corn was suddenly thousands of dollars more expensive than its Brazilian or Argentinian equivalent before it had even left the dock. We were no longer competing on quality or yield. We were losing bids because of a domestic policy that made our own products uncompetitive. It was a self-inflicted wound of colossal proportions, a tariff not on a foreign good, but on America's own ability to access the global market. Compounding this was the American Harvest Integrity Act. Billed as a patriotic measure to guarantee the premium quality of U.S. agricultural exports, its real effect was to create a bureaucratic and financial nightmare designed to function as a non-tariff trade barrier. The Federal Grain Inspection Service was directed to implement a raft of new, highly specific standards. This included an impossibly low tolerance for foreign matter, which could include benign corn dust and new residue thresholds for common U.S. herbicides that were out of sync with established norms in Europe and Asia. Simultaneously, inspection fees were hiked by a staggering 40%. For an international buyer in Tokyo, the purchase of American corn was no longer a reliable transaction. It was a high-stakes gamble. A shipment could be held up for weeks in New Orleans over a minor discrepancy in paperwork or a trace chemical reading that was perfectly acceptable everywhere else in the world. A rejected cargo shipment meant millions in losses for the buyer. The risk became too high, and the world's buyers began a quiet but frantic search for a supplier who offered not just grain, but certainty. These political policy blunders couldn't have come at a worse time. They crashed directly into two pre-existing crises that, when combined with the new regulations, created a perfect storm that choked off America's agricultural arteries. First was Mexico's long-threatened ban on genetically modified corn. The dispute had been simmering for years, with the U.S. initiating a dispute panel under the USMCA trade agreement. However, the aggressive rhetoric from Washington, which dismissed Mexican sovereignty on the issue, backfired spectacularly. Feeling politically cornered, the Mexican government walked away from negotiations and fully implemented its decree in late 2024. officially prohibiting the use of GM corn for human consumption and initiating a rapid phase-out from its animal feed supply chain. For decades, Mexico had been the most reliable, high-volume customer for U.S. corn, a convenient market connected by rail that bought billions of dollars worth annually. With over 90% of U.S. corn being genetically modified, a primary export destination was slammed shut. The damage didn't stop there. International feed corporations like Cargill and ADM, who once bought American corn to supply their massive livestock operations in Mexico, began sourcing non-GMO grain from Brazil and Canada to simplify their supply chains. This created another massive hole in demand for the U.S. product. Second, Mother Nature dealt a devastating blow. For the third consecutive year, persistent drought conditions, a hallmark of a changing climate, plagued the Midwest. This dropped the water levels of the Mississippi River, the main superhighway for moving grain to the export terminals in the Gulf of Mexico, to historic lows. The river became sluggish and shallow, especially at pinch points near St. Louis and Memphis. Barges, the lifeblood of this route, were forced to lighten their loads by up to 25% to avoid grounding, drastically increasing the number of trips, the fuel consumed, and the cost per ton. Insurance premiums for transit on the hazardous river surged. The Port of New Orleans, once a bustling hub of global commerce, transformed into a floating parking lot. Over 200 vessels sat idle at anchor, some waiting for paperwork from the understaffed and overwhelmed FGIS, others for grain stuck in the congested river system, and many more simply waiting for orders that would never come. As the barges sat for weeks in the humid Gulf air, the corn inside them began to degrade. Farmers watched helplessly on their computers as the value of their harvest literally rotted away by the hour. A delay of just 1 week could shear 25 cents off the value of every single bushel. While America was fumbling in a crisis of its own making, Canada was executing a masterfully calculated strategy. Their rise was not a matter of luck. It was the result of years of government investment and a keen understanding of where the future of food was heading. While Washington was building walls, Ottawa was building a reputation. The Canadians had seen the writing on the wall years earlier. The future of agriculture wasn't just about volume, but about trust, transparency, and traceability. In response, the Canadian government and private sector co-invested heavily in a national blockchain-based traceability system called Prairie Trace. This system is a marvel of agricultural technology. It gives every single shipment of Canadian grain a unique digital passport. A buyer at a food processor in Seoul or a supermarket chain in Amsterdam can scan a QR code and instantly see the entire, verified history of the product. It shows the specific farm it came from, the non-GMO seed variety used, a complete record of any fertilizers or pesticides applied, its independently verified carbon footprint score, and its pristine inspection reports. This system even integrates with satellite data to confirm sustainable land use practices. In a market now terrified by the risk and uncertainty of American grain, Canada was offering an ironclad guarantee of quality, safety, and sustainability. They weaponized this advantage with surgical precision. As U.S. trade disputes with China and Mexico spiraled, Canadian negotiators were busy finalizing landmark trade deals. They leveraged their membership in the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership to secure long-term contracts with Japan, a nation obsessed with food safety. They finalized an organic equivalency agreement with South Korea in March 2025, making Canadian grain the preferred choice for the lucrative Korean market. Deals with the Netherlands, Germany, and Italy soon followed, with major European retailers like Carrefour and Tesco signing multi-year contracts for traceable Canadian corn for their private label food products. Canadian rail companies CN and CPKC designated grain as a priority good, offering discounted rates and ensuring dedicated lines to the ports in Vancouver and Prince Rupert. The economic contrast is staggering. In the American Midwest, spot corn prices have plummeted to $3.45 per bushel, a price point well below the average production cost for most farmers. Meanwhile, in Manitoba, traceable, certified non-GMO Canadian corn is fetching a premium, selling for as much as $4.20 per bushel. European buyers are not just willing to pay more for the Canadian product. They are actively rewriting their corporate supply policies to exclude the risk and headache associated with American corn. Canada isn't just selling grain, they are selling peace of mind, and the world is buying. Back in the United States, the consequences are devastatingly real. The abstract numbers from the commodity markets translate into profound human suffering. America's farm stockpiles have swelled to an almost incomprehensible 2.5 billion bushels, the highest level in over 30 years. This isn't just grain in a silo, it's frozen capital, mounting debt, and shattered dreams. Consider John Miller, a third-generation farmer in Lynn County, Iowa. He walks through his machine shed, a place that once held the promise of the harvest. Now he's pointing out which machines to tag for the upcoming auction. The John Deere S780 combine, his father's pride and joy, will be the first to go. He calculates it will bring in enough to cover the interest on his operating loan for another 6 months. "You feel like you failed," he says, his voice quiet. "My grandfather survived the Depression on this land. My dad survived the 80s. I'm losing it to a shipping container tariff." In Iowa, where planting a single acre of corn can cost over $900, thousands of farmers like John have made the heartbreaking calculation that it would cost more to pay for fuel, labor, and drying to harvest their crop than they could ever hope to sell it for. They are leaving billions of dollars of corn to rot in the fields. A wave of bankruptcies is beginning to sweep across the plains. The pain is rippling through the entire rural economy. The John Deere dealership in a nearby town has seen new equipment sales fall by 60%. Local tax revenues have plummeted, forcing school districts to cut arts programs and freeze teacher salaries. The ethanol industry, a key consumer of American corn, is in a tailspin. With cratering margins and collapsing export markets for ethanol itself, over 24 plants have been forced to shut down, including the Valero facility in Columbus, Nebraska, which cut over 100 jobs. Most tragically, food banks across the Midwest are reporting a surge in demand from a new demographic. The very farm families who once fed the nation are now lining up for food assistance to feed their own children. This crisis is not contained to corn. It's a contagion poised to infect the entire American agricultural sector. The next domino to fall is soybeans. Like corn, over 90% of U.S. soybeans are genetically modified. The European Union is now fully implementing its Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM, which will apply to agricultural imports. This creates a de facto trade barrier against products that cannot provide a verifiable, low-carbon life cycle, a standard that traceable, sustainably marketed Canadian and Brazilian soy is designed to meet, and that standard American GM soy is not. From there, the crisis will inevitably jump to the dairy and beef industries. Consider a dairy cooperative in Wisconsin that has spent years building a lucrative market for its premium cheese in Japan. Their Japanese buyer, under pressure from consumers, will soon demand certification that the feed given to their dairy cows was non-GMO and sustainably sourced. When the Wisconsin cooperative can no longer source affordable, certified feed from Iowa or Illinois, they will lose that export contract. Their only options will be to source far more expensive feed from Canada, erasing their profits, or to sell only to the saturated domestic market. The same scenario will play out for beef exporters in Texas and Nebraska. America's status as a protein superpower is directly threatened by the crisis in its feed supply. Washington is now at a crossroads, facing a stark choice that will define the future of American agriculture for the next century. Path 1 is a radical course correction. It requires the immense political will to unwind the very policies that caused this disaster. This means repealing the protectionist shipping tariffs, rejoining international trade frameworks, harmonizing U.S. inspection standards with global partners, and launching a Manhattan Project-level federal initiative to build a nationwide traceability system to compete with Canada's. It's a difficult, humbling path, but it's the only one that leads to recovery. Path 2 is to double down on economic isolationism. This means keeping the tariffs and regulations in place, blaming foreign actors for the consequences, and trying to patch the gaping wounds with government subsidies. But the subsidies will never be enough. They will only create an army of zombie farms, technically solvent, but entirely dependent on government checks, unable to compete globally. This path means watching helplessly as the heartland is slowly sold off to massive corporations and investment funds, and as the United States permanently cedes its role as the world's breadbasket to more nimble, forward-thinking nations. The fate of the American farmer, and a cornerstone of the American economy, hangs in the balance. The decisions made in the next few months will determine whether the silence in the cornfields is a temporary lull or the sound of an industry in terminal decline. The question is, will the U.S. adapt, or will it watch as the very policies designed to protect it instead leave its most critical agricultural sectors behind? We want to hear what you think. Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this update, please like and subscribe as we post videos like this daily. That's all for now. See you in the next video.